ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ श्री गणेशाय नमः। ॐ श्री सरस्वत्यै नमः। ॐ श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवं परमानन्दमाधवम्। सर्ववेदान्तसिद्धान्त गोचरं तमगोचरं गोविन्दं परमानन्दं सद्गुरुं प्रणतोऽस्म्यहम्। Hari Om to all. So, in this Vivek Chudamani, we have completed 31 verses and we were seeing some of the doubts and discussing about those. Some more are pending which we will be taking today. So, we will start. During meditation and contemplation, when I sit even in a simple cross-leg posture, one of my legs goes numb and I tend to gradually slouch. I correct these repeatedly, but then I am not able to concentrate like I should. What is the remedy for this? So actually, if you see yoga shastra paddhati, asanas are meant for this, that we do asanas, different Surya Namaskara, etc., and different kinds of asanas are there, so that for meditation we can sit without moving. So please practice some basic asanas, and if you cannot sit down and this is the problem, you sit on chair. Meditation pertains to the mind, and so even if you sit on a chair, there is no problem. If you can better focus in the meditation by sitting on chair, please do that. There is no such rule that you have to sit down only with cross-leg posture. That is not a must. Those who cannot sit down also can meditate. Okay, so please try one of these. During the satsang, I feel I am sorted, but later again I start suffering from bouts of various emotions. How should one overcome this? So actually the reason is that during the session or when we are in some camp, when we are in satsang, our inspiration level is high and therefore for some time our mind is off all those emotions. But when we go back to our life, those all things come back. It is just like effect of a medicine that doesn't, stay for a long time. So then you have to take another medicine. That's why when you see that the emotions are taking over, again you study something. Be in satsang always. Satsang not necessarily means in company of sages only. You can be in company of good thoughts, good books. Nowadays on all the social media platforms, etc., you have so much of spiritual knowledge which is possible. At least listen to that so that you remain in touch with this spirituality, right? So those things if you practice, it is natural. Don't think that it is only happening with you. It happens with everybody because our mind is like that. Mind goes back to those old habits, old emotions, etc. So what we have to do for that is again and again repeatedly we have to bring the mind back. That is what we have to do. If human life is a karmic lesson to be learned for evolution, then why are we made to forget our mistakes from past lives? Actually, wouldn't remembering these help us to rectify ourselves better? Does it have to be so mysterious, unravel for yourself kind of scenario? In the process, making room for us to make more mistakes and be born again. So question is, why don't we remember our mistakes? Why to go for past life? In this life, you know you have done so many mistakes. Do you remember? No. We remember all the unnecessarily things that are required. Actually, that are not required. That's what we remember. So let us say, for the sake of argument, that we remember all the mistakes of the past lives. Number one, we will not be able to progress because of guilt. We will only think about what happened in the past, which is again an obstacle only. We have, okay, mistakes happen, let it be. Even in this life, what is more important is lesson that you learn from mistake and not the mistake by itself. You should learn something that you have done wrong and you forget about the mistake. Because if you remember the mistake, you will not be able to correct it. For example, suppose I am playing cricket, and if I keep remembering how I got out in the last game, then I won't be able to play this game properly, isn't it? Because all the time I will be reminded of that only. I learn from it, okay, I got out like this, I should not do that. I learn from it, then I forget it and then focus on the present moment. It is actually a blessing that we don't remember anything of the past life. See, already this life, whatever we have lived, that itself is creating so much of havoc in our mind. Now imagine you start remembering everything that everybody has done to us and everything that you have done to them from all the past lives, we'll go mad. So it is a blessing that we don't remember it, because it will again distract us. Important thing is not the mistake. Important thing is presently how I should do. Okay. So in Bhagavad Gita also, Bhagavan Shri Krishna says that I am that apohana shakti also. Apohana means to forget. Even that is me. Mattaha. That also comes from me only. Smriti also, the memory also comes from me, and apohana also. The ability to forget also is from me only. So we are lucky that we keep forgetting things. Okay. That we should not remember. So it is good that we don't remember. Next question. Knowledge destroys ignorance. If it is so, then there is no causal body. If there is no causal body, there is no subtle and gross bodies. Eventually, there is no world. My question is, how the noble person, realized man, behaves with his own body and the world? I am not going to answer this question because in Viveka Chudamani, the topic will come of causal body, etc. Some of you have studied this, many of you have not studied this. Then suddenly they will say, what causal, causal, what, Karan, what? So we will not take this question now. When the topic comes of Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Karana Sharira, that time we will clarify this. Is causal body only ignorance, or is there anything else also in causal body? I am just hinting the answer, that if one thing is destroyed, is everything destroyed? Does realization mean destruction of causal, subtle and gross body, or does it just mean transcending it? Okay. So all those things we will see when the topic comes. Shankaracharya will be taking it elaborately, that time we will see. Next question. Often titiksha is taken as weakness by others. Also in Bhagavad Gita we find Sri Krishna, Bhagavan advises Arjuna to fight and not accept what the Kauravas have done. How can we deal with such situations? I think we are misunderstanding titiksha. Last session also I was mentioning, Shri Krishna is advising Arjuna to do his duty. How can doing your duty be against titiksha? So war there is not against titiksha at all. He is a soldier, he is supposed to fight. Titiksha has to be understood in our perspective. You cannot say to a soldier who is fighting for India on the border that titiksha, let them enter. They slap you on one cheek, you put second cheek. No. You do your duty of fighting against them, against the enemy, and saving your country. That is not against titiksha. What does titiksha mean? Situations over which we have no control, we have to go through them. Situations over which we have no control, or situations fighting for which our time will be wasted. Against them or for them, we have to have this titiksha. Please get this understanding clear. Titiksha is not telling that we should just allow people to do wrong things on us. No, it never says anything like that. Titiksha means sahanam sarvadukkhanam apratikara purvakam chinta vilaparahitam. Isn't it? Gurudev used to say little pinpricks of life. This is that there, today's food is like this, and then that is like that, and today it is so hot, today it is that cold. All these small issues we are talking about. We are not talking about dharma, adharma, etc. big issues. Talking about simple things in life where we waste lot of time in correcting those simple things. Now the watch is kept here, then you will pick up and keep it here. Then again after 5 minutes you will pick up and keep it again here. And that will keep disturbing your mind. Those things are not required. Is it? Your mind is supposed to now focus on something higher, leave it and then let it focus. So titiksha is not against duty which Arjuna is trying to do. Okay, so please understand that. And even if your titiksha is taken as weakness by others, let them take. How does it matter? Let them decide whatever they want to decide. Let them think that you are weak. Why you want to show that you are not weak? Actually, by doing titiksha, you are showing them how strong you are, that you cannot be moved by small things. So let them think that it is your weakness. That's up to them. All right. Next, how do we remind ourselves in difficult times that we are the Supreme Brahman and all we are doing is just watching a movie on the screen and don't have to associate with it or the characters in it? How to do that? It is a very beautiful saying that what happens in the wartime depends on what you do in the peacetime. Means what? A soldier has to fight. But what he does when the war is not happening? Is he waiting for the war, lying down, saying that when war will come, I will get up. Till then, sit. No. You see soldiers, they train every day as though it is war. They keep all their weapons etc. ready as though next moment enemy is going to come. They have drills also. Why? Because that is the preparation you are doing for wartime. Now, if you have done that preparation, when actual war starts, you are ready for it. Otherwise, if you have not done anything, then the belly has come out and then now you can't even run and you will start searching, where is my weapon, okay, now banduk is here, now gun is here, where are the bullets? Then war time will be difficult. Same way here also. In difficult situations, how do I remind myself I am Brahman? If I try to remind myself I am Brahman in normal situation also, when the difficult situations come, automatically that thought will preside over your mind. Automatically that thought will capture your mind. So, to prepare for that difficult situation, every moment you have to try to remember this. I am this Brahman, I am none of this. Not the body, not the mind, not the intellect. I am that Brahman. I am hungry. Who is hungry? The body is hungry. I am not the body. No, but food should be given. Yes, food should be given to the body. But not because I am hungry, but because body needs food. Remind yourself every moment. And see, we are from such beautiful culture that in a day so many reminders are given. When you get up, you are supposed to chant something. While taking bath, you are supposed to chant something. When you sit for studies, when you sit for meals, when you are ready to sleep, every moment you are supposed to chant something. What is all this chanting doing? It is trying to remind us of our true nature. So, if we follow this normal situations, then when the difficult situations come, automatically this thought will come up. Okay, that is the answer. Process to control the sense organs. There are different ways to control the sense organs. One is be away from distractions. That is one way. For example, suppose you know that you are very much attracted to this shopping, etc. And anything good you see, you can't control. Suppose you know that, don't go to malls. Simple. No, but Swamiji, nowadays, malls is not required. Those applications are there. Delete those applications. If that is what is distracting you, don't use it. No TV, I keep watching. Stop watching TV. Or watch for a only particular time. So, one way of controlling the organs is being away from distraction. That is one. Second thing is, which is very, I think, important also is, when there is something better that the sense organs are doing, they will not run behind foolish things. That's why in our culture, if you see, puja is such a beautiful sadhana that all our sense organs are involved in puja. You see, very beautiful decoration will be there. Even if you are not doing, even if you are just watching the puja, very beautiful decoration will be there, and then agarbatti will be there, and ghanta will be there. Different sounds, treat to the eyes, treat to the ears, treat to the nose, treat to the, of course, to the tongue. Delicious naivedya and prasad is made, isn't it? Treat to the skin. Every single thing is now can be focused on Bhagavan. So, if sense organs get something which is better to hold on to, they will not run behind the worldly things. So, give them something better. That way we can control the sense organs. Next question. Are doctrines of karma, rebirth, reincarnation Vedantic truths? I heard that only those doctrines which pass the threefold test of Shruti, Yukti and Anubhava can be called Advaita Vedantic truths. And above doctrines do not pass the Anubhava test. Question mark. So, which means that do they pass the test or not? I hope question is clear, no? Karma, rebirth, are they Vedantic truths or not? See, there are different topics in Advaita Vedanta, in all subjects actually. So, when Advaita Vedanta as a philosophy, it will have to comment on all these topics. So, it will comment on karma theory, rebirth, theory of rebirth, reincarnation, all that, and it is still part of Vedantic truths only. Though the ultimate truth that Advaita Vedanta is telling is you are never born and you never die, but on the Vyavaharika level, on the transactional level, the theory of karma, what we say, no, then rebirth, etc., we do support. Advaita Vedanta supports. Does it pass the threefold test of Shruti, Yukti, Anubhuti? Yes, it does. Shruti says very clearly, we have number of yuktis, and Anubhuti doesn't necessarily mean Anubhuti of us, our experience. That's not the correct translation of Anubhuti. Anubhuti means Vidvat Anubhuti. Anubhuti of great seers, saints, sages, etc. So, they have confirmed that rebirth is possible, etc. Shruti says, Yukti also says, logic also tells you that yes, it is possible, right? So, these are also Vedantic truths. Okay, though the ultimate truth that the Vedanta is saying that the main Siddhanta is different, but these are also facts that Vedanta approves of or supports. Next. As we cover Sadhana Chatushtaya with respect to Uparama, we said it was effortless withdrawal. In Tattvabodha it says Swadharma Anushtanameva, observance of one's own dharma duty. So, does it mean withdrawing from everything except your responsibility, and eventually that will be to be one with one's true nature, Swadharma of Jiva Brahma Aikya? The definition seems slightly different, but at a higher level is the same. Can you please confirm or clarify? You are absolutely right, bang on right. The definition, and if you, I don't know whether you noticed or not, in many places I gave reference definition from Tattvabodha, but Uparama time I did not give. That is because of the same reason that Uparama definition here, what is said here is where the thought is not resting on the outside object. That is called as Uparama in Vivek Chudamani, isn't it? Esha Uparati Uttama. That Bahya Analambanam Vrittehe. Vrittehe of the thought, Bahya Analambanam, not resting, not supporting on the outside world. So effortless withdrawal is what is said here as Uparama. Whereas Tattvabodha definition will say Swadharma Anushtanameva. Okay. There are different ways of interpreting that Swadharma also. You have given two interpretations. One, Swadharma means one's own duties. Now, if I do one's own duties, I automatically be withdrawn from all the unnecessary things. That is one point that we must remember. Swadharma also means one's own nature, which is the true self, which is me, really me. So, focusing on that also can mean Uparama. Right? Third interpretation of Swadharma also can be the context of Uparama there in Tattvabodha or in Vivek Chudamani is after sannyasa, isn't it? After renunciation, now you are developing these qualities and approaching a teacher and then learning. Sanyasya Shravanam Kuryat is said, no? Not the physical renunciation. We have seen, Shankaracharya himself has clarified, we are not talking about physical renunciation, but mind is renounced from all those things. So then Swadharma means Swadharma of a sannyasi. What is that? That is following spiritual path alone that leads to liberation. That itself is Uparama. Okay. So the two definitions are not contradictory to each other, but are complementary to each other. One can be considered as practice, another can be considered as result of that practice. That when I practice Swadharma Anushtana, my mind will be automatically withdrawn. Isn't it true that when we are just following our duties, mind will not be tempted to do wrong things? Because every time you will ask this question, is this my duty? If not, you will give it up. So, very strongly following one's own duties also will have impact on mind, that the mind will be withdrawn. So, that is also, so Swadharma Anushtanam leads to this effortless withdrawal. So, like this you can understand both the definitions. Okay, given by Shankaracharya only in different texts. Next, Shamadhi Shat Sampatti is clubbed together as one of the fourfold qualifications because they are all related to the mind, and cultivating one leads to development of another. But isn't it the same with Viveka, Vairagya, Mumukshutvam also? Like Viveka leads to Vairagya and Vairagya strengthens Viveka, and Vairagya and Shamadhi Shat Sampatti strengthens Mumukshutvam. Is it because maybe Viveka, Vairagya, Mumukshutvam has to do more with the intellect? Is this thinking correct? Correct. Shamadhi Shat Sampatti are related to mind, Viveka, Vairagya, Mumukshutva are more related to intellect. But there is a proper order in these four. Viveka leads to Vairagya, Vairagya and Shamadhi Shatka Sampatti leads to Mumukshutva. There is a proper order. You cannot do Vairagya, you cannot practice Vairagya without Viveka. If you don't know what is real, what is unreal, what is permanent, what is impermanent, how can you give up impermanent? That is not possible. But that's not the case in case of in the Shamadhi Shat Sampatti. You can practice Titiksha even if you have not done Shama. Of course, each one will complement each other and will strengthen one another. That is true. That is true for all. Viveka, Vairagya and Mumukshutva also. But you don't have to go in sequence. But here you actually have to go in sequence. I hope that clarifies. Vairagya cannot be practiced without Viveka. So that has to be sequential. And of course, when Vairagya is practiced more, it will strengthen Viveka. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. But still, it cannot be done before it. Before Viveka, we cannot start with Vairagya. Once Viveka comes, then Vairagya comes. Then Vairagya does practice more, will strengthen Viveka, true. It will strengthen each other, but it has to be sequential. Whereas Shamadhi Shat Sampatti need not be sequential. That's why they are clubbed together. And as you rightly said, Viveka, Vairagya, Mumukshutva pertain more, to intellect. Shamadhi Shat Sampatti to mind. We have also seen that Shamadhi Shat Sampatti is useful especially in meditation. That doesn't mean Viveka, Vairagya and Mumukshutva are not useful, but these Shamadhi Shat Sampatti are more useful in meditation. That's why also they are clubbed together. Next, In Vedantic thought system, we talk of our being essentially Brahman, consciousness, as in Aham Brahmasmi, and also of the supreme consciousness. Are the two different? If yes, is it dualistic or non-dualistic self? They are not different. Supreme consciousness itself is called as Brahman, itself is called as the self. There is non-dual Brahman, there is only one reality. You call it Brahman, you call it self, you call it consciousness, it's one and the same. Sahanam sarva dukkhanam. To what extent should we have tolerance for something wrong being done to either ourselves or someone near to one? What is the point where we say enough and take action against atyachara? I think I have clarified this, that titiksha is not related to any of these. Wherever it is required to fight, where the fight is going to give result and will not disturb our sadhanas, please do it. Where it is required, the change is required, it is a must. Very beautiful thing. I think I had shared also that God give me three things. Number one, strength to change what I can. Number two, capacity to accept what I can't change. And number three, wisdom to differentiate between what I can change and what I cannot change. Very beautiful prayer. God give me three things. Strength to change whatever I can change. Capacity to accept whatever I cannot change. And wisdom to clearly differentiate between what is that which I can change and what is that which I cannot change. Okay. With this, you practice titiksha. Next. When Shraddha is firm in a sadhaka, the attaining self is definite. But why self is referred as Vastu here? Not here. Vastu is very much used for Brahman in general in Vedanta. In Upanishads etc. also, Vastu is very commonly used word for reality, for that supreme reality. Generally in many of our languages, Vastu means object. Isn't it? Vastu means object. But you will see in Vedanta, most of the times, Vishaya word will be used for objects. Vishaya. Whereas Vastu is generally used for that supreme Brahman. Right. Next one. Difference between Vyavaharika Satta and Pratibhasikata Satta is not still clear. Could not able to find the difference in reality which is Vyavaharika and which is Pratibhasika. Vyavaharika means transactional reality where you can transact. Pratibhasika means apparent reality. So there is a rope which you misunderstand as snake. Now the rope is Vyavaharika Satta and snake that you see which is not real, which is apparent, is Pratibhasika Satta. You cannot transact with the rope, with the snake, sorry. To somebody else, if you say that I will sell you this snake, that person will not accept. Why? Because there is no snake. He doesn't see the snake. You are seeing the snake, but that person doesn't see the snake. So, Vyavaharika Satta means transactional reality, which is common experience of others, everybody. Whereas Pratibhasika is apparent reality. Everybody may not be seeing the same thing. Dream is apparent reality. When you get up, you cannot transact with the world. Can you transact with the dream world when you get up? That in the dream, I had a wife and that wife had my phone in the hand and then I got up. Oh, that phone is left with the wife. Right? The dream was all false. You cannot go back and say that give me my phone. That's not possible. So, dream is Pratibhasika Satta, apparent reality, and waking world is Vyavaharika Satta, transactional reality. Okay, hope it is clear. Next, what is Bhakti according to Shankaracharya? Difference between this Bhakti and Bhakti Marga. What is Upasana in context of Bhakti? Please clarify. So, actually what is Bhakti according to Shankaracharya is already defined. Swaswarupanusandhanam Bhakti. And as I had explained also elaborately that in the session, that Bhakti and Bhakti Marga are different. The path of devotion contains the spiritual sadhanas which strengthen the Bhakti. it will have pujanam, japa, chintanam, etc. Okay, by which you develop bhakti, and then you reach the pinnacle of bhakti, which is Swaswarupa Anusandhanam. Okay, so Bhakti Marga leads to this bhakti, and what definition Shankaracharya has given is the final definition of bhakti. As a goal he has defined, not as a quality to be acquired. He is not defining as a marga, as a path, he is defining the goal. Okay, then what are the sadhanas, what are the upasanas in the context? This Vivek Chudamani will not give that, because this is not a Bhakti Shastra. This is Vedanta Grantha, isn't it? Bhakti Shastra will give that, Narad Bhakti Sutra, Bhagavata, etc. will give you this answer. Okay, but general answer that is given is Pujanam, Japas, Chintanam, Kramat. In order you follow Puja, Japa and Chintanam. That will give that, that will help you in developing that Bhakti. Alright. Next. Will you please elaborate to explain the nuances of the terms Swaswarupa Anusandhanam and Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam? So actually Swaswarupa Anusandhanam is in the context of knowledge that is given in the text, and Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam is in the context of Upasana. I hope you remember this. Not long ago, okay, just 2 classes back this was discussed. So Ahangrahopasana, no? Upasana means what? You imagine something higher on something lower, not knowledge. This is Upasana. Example, Lord Shiva is imagined on that Shivalinga, and then you worship that Shivalinga as Lord Shiva. So in Swa Atma Tattva Anusandhanam is Ahangrahopasana. What is happening there? That Supreme Brahman is imagined on the self, and then you do Upasana of that. You are not saying I am that. You are worshipping that on me, on myself. That is the difference between Jnana and Upasana in this context. Okay. Technically, if you see word meaning, Swaswarupa Anusandhanam and Swa Atma Tattva Anusandhanam, it is one and the same. The meaning is one and the same. But you see Shankaracharya is saying Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam iti apare jaguhu. Some other people are calling it as Swatma. So he is talking about some different opinion, no? So it has to be different from what he has given as first opinion. First opinion is Swaswarupa Anusandhanam bhaktihi iti abhidhiyate. And then he says Swatma Tattva Anusandhanam iti apare jaguhu. So that other opinion is about the Upasana. So though the word meaning is same, the contextual meaning is different. The first context is that of Jnana, knowledge. The second context is that of Upasana. That's the difference. As per the verse, Viveka is firm understanding or conviction in the fact Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya. However, is it not possible to have this conviction at transactional level of reality, Vyavaharik Satta, where most sadhakas would be at? No, it is possible. See, on the transactional level of reality, conviction is possible that Brahma alone is Satya, everything else other than Brahman is Asatya or Mithya. That conviction is possible. Experience is not possible. Experience will happen when we go to that Paramarthika Satta, when that absolute reality level, that experience will come. But conviction, intellectual conviction is possible on Vyavaharika Satta, where all the seekers are, all the students are. All of us are right now on Vyavaharika Satta. Most of us, some of us might have reached, most of us are still on Vyavaharika Satta level. So conviction intellectual is still possible that Brahman alone is real or Brahman alone is permanent, everything else is unreal or impermanent. This conviction is possible on Vyavaharika Satta. Experience is not possible. Experience has to be on Paramarthika Satta. So you are right in one way that experience will need to give up this Vyavaharika Satta and go to Paramarthika Satta. But conviction is possible. Intellectual conviction is possible. Right. Next question. How to be detached while engaging in worldly duties? How to control anger when it arises? So how to be able, how to detach Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gives very nice answer. He says you have two hands. With one hand hold on to the Lord's feet, and with the second hand keep working in the world. Then it will be easy to detach. What happens is we leave the Lord's feet and both hands are engaged in the action. Then we say difficult. Of course it is difficult. Another beautiful example that Gurudev gives, which also we had discussed in the class, is what? If you put oil on your hand and then start to take the fruit of jackfruit, okay, then it will not stick. Similarly, while living in the world, put the oil of Vairagya and then go on. How to do that? The only way to do that is practicing it. There is no other option possible. So, every moment that we are engaged in the world, even in the duty, we keep reminding ourselves that this is my offering to Lord. This is not any personal thing, etc., etc. This is not for any other purpose. This is only for purification of mind. Then we will be detached. Also, one practical thing is, if we do it as duty, it will be easier for us to detach. For example, your mother sends you to purchase something in the market. You say actually you don't want to go to market. You are least interested in specially going when mother has told you. Suppose you want to purchase something is a different thing. Mother has told you, so but you still go. Why? Because you know that finally food she is only giving. No, so I have to do, otherwise difficult for me. So as a duty you do means what? You go there, you purchase and you come back. Not attached to the action. And if the shop is closed, you come back and say, mother, shop was closed. Not attached to the action at all. So you can work without getting attached to the action. Why? Because the action is now performed for somebody else. That doesn't mean you are disinterested in action. This example is that kind. But that doesn't mean in all kinds of action you are disinterested. No, you are disinterested. You understand the value of that action. You are disinterested in the result of that action. See the beauty. You are interested in what? You are interested in offering that action unto the Lord, and not the result that is coming out of. You are not interested in the result. If we do like this karma yoga, if we practice, it will be easier to detach. How to control anger when it arises? That's the only time we are supposed to control anger, when it arises. If it doesn't arise, how will you control anger? That is the time to control. There are many methods which can be said as what we say, firefighting methods. That once you are angry, you do. No, better things to do is called as preparatory methods. You make sure and calm your mind in such a way that anger doesn't arise. And if at all it arises, you are still able to control your speech. Because the worst thing that can do is, talk or allow your hands and legs to work when you are angry. See this karmendriya, no? Hands, legs and mouth especially. If it is working when you are angry, you had it. Don't engage into any action at that time. Just go away from that situation. If possible physically, if not possible mentally. Go away from that situation. It's difficult, but it is something that we have to do. Right. When we talk about titiksha, are we talking exclusively about accepting the small discomforts or any situation that arises which isn't in our favor? We need to put efforts from our side when adharma is happening, right? So titiksha does not apply there, correct. The point I had in mind was regarding disrobing of Draupadi Ma. She would obviously feel upset. So how does titiksha come into the picture here? If you see Draupadi's example also, she was very clear. There was a time where the situation was under control, but later on she understood that situation is not under control. Nobody's control. Neither the 5 of the strongest people whom I have married, nor the elders and wise people of the country who were present in that sabha, nor with all the wicked people. Finally, she understood that the situation is not in my hand also. How long can I, with my limited power, save myself? Then what did she do? She surrendered. And when she surrendered, Bhagavan saved. So it's up to us. In all such situations, actually there is nothing wrong being Draupadi. Actually we should be like Draupadi only. I am not saying we should be in situations like Draupadi, but I am saying we should be like Draupadi, who understood that nobody is mine other than the Lord. And she actually, if you read also, she actually curses herself, saying that why I went even for help to all the other people. I should have directly gone to God. He is my Krishna, he will save me. Why did I go and ask for, help from Bhishma and Dhritarashtra and Vidura? Why? Why I looked at my 5 husbands? Why? If that kind of surrender attitude is there, titiksha will become very easy. अब सौंप दिया इस जीवन का सब भार तुम्हारे हाथों में है, जीत तुम्हारे हाथों में है, हार तुम्हारे हाथों में. The whole thing I have now given in your hand. Now you decide which way you want to take me. But this kind of surrender takes efforts. Okay, till the time small battles we have to keep winning. So titiksha specially pertains to the situations which are out of our control. Where we see something is wrong and we can do something about it, we should do. No titiksha there. Titiksha is for your own pain, no? Somebody else is suffering in front of you, you cannot allow that to happen. If you can change, you must change. You must change. That is part of your duty. Titiksha and tapasya, are these words synonyms and can they be used interchangeably? No. Titiksha means whatever has come unasked, you go through it. Tapasya means you take difficult situations purposely on yourself and then go through it. That's the difference between titiksha and tapasya. Titiksha means whatever situation arises, you are going through it, forbearing it. Tapasya is where you purposely take difficult situations to test yourself, to develop, your chitta shuddhi. That is called as tapasya, austerity. That's the difference. Which book we have to refer pertaining to Vivek Chudamani, and is pen drive available? I think Gurudev's commentary on Vivek Chudamani is available. You go to Chinmay Mission website, you will see, and also the pen drive. Pen drive contains Gurudev's lectures. Some 100 plus lectures are there on Vivek Chudamani, which I had mentioned in the beginning. Both these things I had mentioned, that you must have your own copy of Vivek Chudamani book, and the details are given actually in the WhatsApp groups also, the link is provided, and pen drive etc. also you can search, and Gurudev's video talks are available as pen drive. Right. Next question. Bhagavan starts by telling us how rare this human birth is, but it frightens me a little, meaning we are in Kali Yuga of Manvantara, which is somewhere in the middle of Brahmaji's day or life. I am not sure, but that is millions of years. So I am sorry to say it is this way, but I feel a bit shameful to finally get this life, and even then I am barely making a dent. If it is true that the subtle body continues with all the karmas intact, even though dissolution, whether that is Brahmaji's day or night or Brahmaji's life, it is a very, 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 very long time, and I am wondering what have I been doing in so many lives. Please don't have such kind of thinking at all. It doesn't matter how many births we have taken and how many births we have wasted. What matters is, let us not waste this birth remembering all those births and wasting our time in finding out how many births have I lost. Even a moment we should not waste thinking about it. We should just say that, okay, I wasted now I don't want to waste. The only thing that we should learn is be more focused, be more intent on the spiritual path. Okay, that's the only learning that we should have from all these past births. Okay, so while it is not a question, it is very hard to fathom, and I am thinking it is his compassion to say it is rare to get human birth and build our resolve to do something out of it. Am I understanding how many chances I have been given correctly? You don't have to think about how many chances have I been given. The only thing is that now I have understood. Let me not waste any more time now. Let me not go back and find out how many births I have lost. or I have missed. In future, let me not do it. Right. Next. When we are supposed to be tough to discipline our mind, we let it run wild, and when we are supposed to be kind, we become judgmental and tough on ourselves. The intellect is needed to assess the true nature of the situation and act accordingly, but vasanas take over. How do we strengthen the viveka to overcome this loop? This loop can be overcome. You have rightly said that you have to strengthen the intellect, which can take actions against your vasanas also. How will you do that? You give that strength to it. In world also, now when we are transacting, a person who is capable of taking decision should be given power to take decision. Careful, I am telling some very important point. Person who is capable of taking decision should be given power to take that decision. Then only it will work. If you don't give the power to take decisions who is capable, it will ruin everything. At the same time, if you give that power to somebody else who is incapable of taking decisions or is taking wrong decisions, then again there will be a big problem. Now that you have understood that vasanas are not always taking right decisions and intellect is taking right decision, give power to the intellect to take decision. How do I do that? What you call strengthen your intellect. How? Study. Give more and more clarity to the intellect so that intellect will not be confused when the situation arises. Give complete clarity. What is my dharma? What am I supposed to do as a spiritual seeker? What is right thing for me to do? What is waste for me? Give more and more knowledge and more hands-on experience to intellect. Every situation arises, give intellect. Tell me what you are supposed to do. You are supposed to tell me what is to be done. You said that, okay, I will follow. Go against the mind. Strengthen your intellect saying that yes, you are telling me rightly, I will follow you. Then the intellect will be guide you against the tide of the vasanas also. Okay, that's what you should do. In session 12, reference to two definitions of bhakti. Can one progress from ahangraho upasana to nirguna upasana, or are the two exclusive? They are two exclusive. We need not do ahangraho upasana to go to nirguna upasana or to the jnana. We can directly go to nirguna upasana or jnana. We don't have to go through ahangraho upasana. It's not a must. Right. I always understood bhakti in terms of duality. Also, bhakti later by His grace will lead to jnana. Now, as you explained in Vivek Chudamani, bhakti is defined as abidance in the self. If one has reached that stage, then further sadhana is to just remain and maintain that stage. Going to guru etc. does not apply. Correct. But as I told you, the definition of bhakti that is given in Vivek Chudamani is the goal definition of bhakti. That is where we have to reach, not the path. So obviously when you reach the destination, you don't have to do any other sadhana. So all other things are to reach that destination. Guru upasadhana, approaching a teacher, studying, clarifying the doubts, meditating, all this is means to go to that destination. So Vivek Chudamani definition gives the goal definition with respect to the goal, that is bhakti. Right? But what you have said is right. Bhakti not necessarily means duality. Advaita bhakti is also there, very much there. Why is this illusory world even created in the first place? It doesn't have any real value or relevance. When we take example of watching a movie on a screen and say that movies are unreal and only the screen is real, in that example, and to movies that are created for entertainment of these unreal body and mind. Was this world of mithya created by for God's entertainment? What purpose does it serve? First of all, to whom can you ask this question, why is this illusory world created? You cannot ask this question to God, because God has not created illusory world. You have created illusory world. So ask question to yourself, why have you created it? Just imagine in a dream, you have created a dream and you are asking question, why God, why you created? God has not done anything. Is it for God's pleasure? No. Actually, God's creation is for us to get liberation. Actually speaking, every single thing that God has created helps us in our spiritual life. Every single thing. Careful. Every single thing that God has created. It includes mountains, rivers, trees, and it also includes your mind and your ego. Every single thing that God has created is to help us to get out of this imaginary world created by us. So understand this perspective clearly. The illusory world is created by me. What God has created is only to help me get out of this illusory world. Isn't it true that everything that is God's creation teaches us spiritual things? You take anything, you take mountains, you take river, you take tree, you take anything, human beings for that matter also that are created by God, they teach us so many things. Now we learn wrong things, God cannot do anything about it. Everything that is created by God is to help us walk the spiritual path. We should take the help to walk the spiritual path. He has created a whole thing for that. So the whole world is not for God's pleasure, that God is created the world and now enjoying. Very good. You are suffering, He is enjoying. He is not a that kind of entity. He feels more pain when we suffer. He is like our mother, no? Is there any mother who will enjoy when the son is suffering? No. So it's not that the world is created for God's pleasure or anything. The world is created for us to get out of it. Okay, right. In Ahangrahopasana, the Supreme is invoked on me rather than in me. Can you please explain this a little more? Yes, correct. On me means, what it means is Vigraha. Upasana itself means invoking something on something, not in something. Just don't focus too much on the grammar part of it. The point is what? On some smaller object, something higher is invoked. That is called as Upasana. So you are invoking the Supreme on yourself. In yourself there is Supreme, but we are not talking right now about Jnana part of it. We are only talking about Upasana part of it. So that has to be on. That's the correct way. How do I overcome my laziness to wake up in the morning to do dhyana or study of the scriptures? I understand that I am not treating mumukshutva as much as my hair being on fire. While I understand it conceptually, I am not able to implement it. Please guide. It will not happen overnight, but we have to continuously pursue it. If you are not able to get up early in the morning, don't feel dejected. Keep trying. One day you will get it. It's a matter of habit. Our mind has gotten into habit of waking up late. Now put another habit to the mind to get up early. For that, what you do, you start something that is important that you have to do in the morning, then mind will have something to get up to. Otherwise, you say you just get up in the morning. For what? Nothing. It won't work. Even if you are saying study, etc., see, study can be done afterwards also. Put some other kind of discipline to the mind that, okay, 7 to 8, I am going to listen to a session. It is like my everyday class. I cannot miss that class. So 7 o'clock, if I have to attend the class, I have to get up much before that, finish everything and be ready for the class. And the 7 to 8 class doesn't happen at 9 to 10. Therefore, I cannot say that, okay, I will get up at 8 and then I will attend the class at 9. No, the class happens only at 7 to 8. Something like this you give to the mind so that mind becomes disciplined. It will not happen overnight, but you have to pursue it and it will happen. Alright. Next, to make the mind effortlessly go towards God, love for God has to be developed. I understand that. But what if there is no inclination to do puja, japa, etc.? Those are done very mechanically for me. What else can we do to increase love for God? Another things that you can do is listen to the glories of the Lord. That also will develop that bhakti. Isn't it? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. Padasevanam comes much later. Before that, so many things are there. Shravanam, you listen. More and more glories of the Lord you listen, the devotion for the Lord becomes stronger. Actually, when we speak also to people, no, topic should be God or Vedanta, something higher. Not always the worldly topic. Start discussing that, the love for God will increase. Read the biographies of saints, of devotees. Listen to the stories of devotees. You will have stronger devotion for Lord. So there are many ways by which we can do it. Next, we are fed with unreal expectations of how a marriage or relationship should work and how there is someone made for each one of us. While I understand all that are worldly ways of making us happy and finding comfort, how do I stop the longing for the so-called true love and a life partner when I see couples in love around me all the time? I also understand this is all Maya, but how would you make your body, mind and intellect not constantly think of the things people you don't have while living in this illusory world? See, first of all, your experience is sufficient teacher for you to understand that there is nothing called as true love in the world. The only true love that is possible is with Lord, because He is true love. That's the only true love that is possible. All other things are filmy love. Now you decide whether you want to get into it or not. Number one. Number two, you are saying that how to remind your body, mind, etc. constantly not to think about people or things that are not in your life. Give mind to think something else. Then it will give up what is not required. You see, mind is like child, no? Mind is like child. The child catches hold of something and doesn't want to leave. So mind has taken the remote. Mind means the child. The child has taken the remote and keeps playing with it. Now you want the remote to change the TV, but the child will not give. Then what you say? You try to pull more, he will cry and he will do more things. But then what you do? You take mobile and you say, see, take this. The child drops the remote and takes the mobile. Now what? You take the remote and you do your job, let the child do its job. Give mind something better, it will give up what is not important. So then you will stop thinking about things and people who are not there anymore in your life. That's the way to do it. Don't get into what people are doing. Never feel that on social media when they put pictures etc. and funny not funny, very high level captions etc. True love etc. Don't get confused. You would have, see, the picture can only capture the image, not emotions. We don't know the two people who are holding each other, what are they thinking? We don't even know whether they are thinking about each other or thinking about some other people. Never get fooled by all this drama. This is all just appearing. Okay, don't get into it at all. You have understood right thing. This all is just funny business. Let me do what is better. So do that. Give mind that what is better, and mind will not think about all other things. In Bhagavad Gita, it has been said that soul had falsely made connection with body, which is asat, and thus feels sukha and dukkha. In what manner it is possible for soul, the subject, and how can we understand it? As in context of soul, it is well established that na karoti na lipyate. Then how it appears possible? I think some confusion is there between the soul and the self. Whoever is asking the question, please read Bhagavad Gita properly. There is a difference between Jiva and Atma. I am purposely not using the word soul. Jiva is who is attached to the body and therefore becomes the doer and enjoyer. Whereas the self, the Atma, doesn't attach to anything and therefore na karoti na lipyate, doesn't do anything and doesn't get tempted by anything. These are very different things. Jiva. So Jiva's essential nature is Atma, but because of its association and identification with the body, mind, intellect, it feels that it is going through all these. Okay. So these are two different things that are mentioned. Self doesn't get identified with anything. So it remains na karoti na lipyate. That which gets identified is Jiva. And that identification is also false identification. Right. How doing nothing is an action? Because you are doing nothing. You do nothing, nothing also becomes action. What it means is, actually we cannot remain without action. Even when I say, I am doing nothing, but you are sitting. No, but I will stand and I will do nothing. You are standing. No, but I am not moving my body, but you are breathing. I stopped my breathing, but you are thinking. Mental action. So every single thing is action. Even when in common parlance we say, I am doing nothing nowadays, that doesn't mean that you are actually doing nothing. You are doing so many things. Doing nothing is not possible only. As long as body, mind, intellect is there, it will keep on doing things. It cannot remain without action. So doing nothing is also an action. What is the difference between pleasure, joy and bliss, Ananda? So in the context of Vedanta, pleasure, we say sensual pleasure. The pleasure, that the joy that we get from the senses. So from eyes, ears, nose, etc. That is what we call as sukha, pleasure or joy. Whereas Ananda is bliss. We refer to that Ananda is of that self. Not Vishaya Sukha, but Ananda. In English, pleasure, joy, bliss are one and the same. Okay. In Vedanta, we have defined it differently so that when we say bliss, we immediately understand we are talking about the self. When we say joy, we understand that we are talking about the Vishaya Sukha, joy and sorrow in that context. You see, there is joy, there is opposite of joy as sorrow, but for bliss, there is no opposite of bliss. That's why that bliss word is referred for the self, because this bliss is beyond joy and sorrow. There is no opposite to it, isn't it? So that is the meaning. I think some more questions have come today, I think. We have some 5-10 minutes, we will complete that also. When I inquire on who really I am, I get convincing answer that certainly I am not the body, but another entity other than the body, and that entity is connected to my mind. When I further reflect on the mind, then my attention shifts to the one who is seeing the mind, my awareness of the mind. Then the question then shifts to, am I the awareness that sees the mind, the awareness itself? At this point, I am unable to think and hold on to the thought further, and the question remains unsolved. Yes, you are that. You are that witness which is illumining, as you said, which is aware of the mind. That awareness you are. Awareness, consciousness is one and the same. That you are. And not the one who is thinking, not the one who is suffering. So you maintain that thought that I am that uninvolved witness, uninvolved awareness. That is what you are. I am identifying with my body and my physical looks. As I age, my body ages and then the body loses its luster. One day when the end of the body will happen, how will I know that I don't exist anymore? That I is not capital I. That small I knows that the body is now dropping and it has to go and take up another body. That capital I, the self, doesn't know anything about the body. The rope doesn't know anything about the snake. Okay. Why? Because for the rope alone is. For the capital I, for the self alone is. There is no dropping of body, taking up of new body, nothing like that is there. Right? The jiva will understand, because jiva is involved with, identified with all that. So jiva will take care of it. We don't have to worry about that. But for the self, capital I, all that is not there and not required also. For proper chanting of mantras, some Sanskrit words, how to practice? Is there any book or any notes available for further practice? So many Sanskrit, etc. You can do. So many courses are also there. Chanting courses are also run by Chinmay International Foundation. You can join them, and learn the chanting. Another best method is keep listening. You will learn to chant. That's the method that we all use, from childhood, isn't it? How did we learn language? Our mother tongue, how did we learn? By listening only. When we were small children also, our mother, father, parents, grandparents, they used to teach us, isn't it? Pa, 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 ka, 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 ka. Like that only we learnt, isn't it? They did not teach, you see, this is ka, then this is pa. No, that came later. Akshara Abhyas came later. First we learned The language like that only you can learn. We do Vedantic study and take our mind inwards towards the self to realize Brahman, which we are striving to know. When we simultaneously do Puranic studies, we understand Bhagavan and their Mahima. His Mahima. Srimad Bhagavatam opens our eyes to something totally different about divine glory. This causes confusion in the mind on what to follow and what to explain to our youth who bombard us with seeking questions. Can you give us some clarity in which direction we need to take our mind when we are walking this path without a physical guru being there to show us the right path? Please don't get confused. All texts are telling the same point. Even Bhagavad is telling the same point. What is Bhagavad telling? Yena kena prakarena manah krishne niveshayet. Isn't it? Atha kena api upayena manah krishne niveshayet. Bhagavad says also. By any means. You see, the way it is said may be different, but what is said is same only. Vedanta also, what does it say? That you remain ever in the thought that I am Brahman. Now that is what is said in Bhagavatam in a different way by calling it as Krishna. There is no confusion. And mind, what kind of sadhana one has to take has to be decided personally. But just because we are studying Vedantic text doesn't mean that it is opposed to the Puranic stories, etc. that we are hearing. Rather, Puranic stories are giving the same truth, the same meaning, the same knowledge, but in a story format. So they are not contradictory to each other. And when youngsters are asking questions to us, please don't get into that phase where you have to answer everything. No, you don't have to answer. Sometimes you are capable of answering something, you answer. Other things you tell them that, you ask this person, he is knowledgeable in that field, you please go and ask. Don't get into pressure that you have to solve all the doubts of youngsters. No, because it can never happen. Our job is only to guide whenever somebody comes to us. So never get confused between these two. They are not different paths. They are only different ways of looking at the same thing. Okay. So there is no confusion. When it comes to the path also, the paths are not different. It's not that the Bhagavad Gita is giving a different path than the Bhagavatam and Vivek Chudamani is giving a totally different path. No. They all are giving the same path, but they are giving importance to different things. Why? Because we all are different. For some of us, some path will appeal and some important factor will appeal. For some other people, some other thing will appeal. That's why they are not in any kind of, there is no confusion actually. More and more we study, it will become more and more clear. I will not read the question, but I have understood the essence of the question. The essence of the question is, do we as seekers and Vedantins need to know many mantras, stotrams and rituals such as puja, etc. and do such upasanas too on our spiritual journey? And is this way not different to the philosophy of the self and Brahman as in the Upanishads? So we see many pujas, etc. being done elaborately, with all the rituals, etc. So that is the context in which the question is asked. First of all, it is not opposed to Upanishadic knowledge. Because if you follow the ritual properly, what are we doing? We are invoking the Lord from within us. Isn't it? Dhyanam, Avahanam we are touching the Vigraha, the Murti of the Lord, and we are touching another hand to our heart. And we are saying, O Lord of my heart, please be present in a physical form for some time so that I can worship. And then at the end of it, you take it back in you. So the rituals are not opposed to the knowledge, number one. Do we have to do all the elaborate rituals? That is up to you. If you have inclination towards it, do it. If you don't have inclination towards it, don't do it. The essence should not be lost. The essential point is what? That mind should be focused on God. Right? Do we have to do all that? Not necessary. You see, if you want, you can. Last question. I think this came during the class. If I have an example, 200 bad karma phala to endure and 100 good karma phala to endure, it is better not to try to do more karmas to get good karma phala or even to better it, but better to do karma yoga and gain chitta shuddhi to give strength to bear consequences of whatever phala I have to endure. Correct. That understanding is correct, because we can never be sure whether the action that I am doing is correct or not correct. So doing Karma Yoga is the safest option. After the teachings, we know to do all actions with Karma Yoga spirit. I guess I have given 200 and 100 in the example, but in real, who knows how many bad karmas I have done. Correct. That is why I wanted to ask whether your understanding is correct. Yes, it is 100% correct. What is the understanding? Forget about good action, bad action, how many I have performed, how many I am doing, or how many I will be doing. Focus on Karma Yoga. Perform every single duty as an offering to God. That is what you should do. Iti. Thus we complete all the questions that have come so far. From the next session, we will continue with the remaining verses. Now we are going towards a very beautiful section of Viveka Chudamani, where Shankaracharya ji is depicting in front of us the process of Guru Upasadana, where the student approaches the teacher, communicates to the teacher what kind of pain the student is in and what does he want, and what is the reply of the teacher, how teacher consoles and comforts the student that don't worry. Then the student actually asks the questions, the most famous 7 questions of Viveka Chudamani. This beautiful portion we are entering, it is a very beautiful depiction, but more than that, the poet in Shankaracharya ji is just going full-fledged. So I am sure we are going to enjoy this next section also. From the next class, we will start with verse number 32. All right. Thank you all. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.